That's interesting. There's so much data here, so much insight, and it really does matter for the credit unions we're working with. We have to ask, how do you go to your leadership teams and your boards of directors and advocate for a shift in your workplace strategy? We recommend you focus the conversation on people. They're your most valuable and most expensive asset. So is engagement a buzzword? It's certainly one of our top 5 client questions. How do we support greater engagement with our employees? Highly engaged employees help organizations innovate and stay ahead of competition. Steelcase, one of the world's largest furniture manufacturers, studied over 12,000 workers worldwide in 2015 and found that only 13% were highly engaged. Even more troubling is their finding that a fully third of employees are actively disengaged. These are net detractors where in some cases it would make better sense to pay them to stay at home and do nothing every day. They also found a high correlation between workplace satisfaction and engagement. In the United States, 40% of workers are satisfied with their workplace and engaged or highly engaged with their organization. They measured engagement by asking questions such as, would you recommend your company as an employer? And they measured satisfaction by asking questions such as, are you able to concentrate easily or work in teams without being interrupted? But it's a bit of a chicken and egg conversation, isn't it? Certainly there is some correlation. My question is, to what degree is a highly disengaged worker satisfied with anything? Something that was even more telling in the research was the finding that engaged employees have more control over their experiences at work. This finding reinforces Leesman's observations that workers with a higher degree of choice in their workspaces rate their workplaces as more effective and supportive of productivity. So how do we focus in the age of distraction? As workers, we are constantly distracted and interrupted by technology and by each other. This is having a huge impact on productivity, engagement, well-being, and performance. It increases stress levels and it pushes us towards coping strategies, such as multitasking and continuous partial attention. This new term I learned, the idea that while we're paying attention to everything, we are actually paying attention to nothing. So what does this tell us? If we need to be deeply focused, then we need workspaces that shield out unwanted distractions. We've also learned that to stay focused is exhausting for our brains. Staying seated all day sabotages our ability to concentrate. Our workplaces must help us move, and they must provide areas for our brains to take a break. It's easy to focus on the things we can measure. I'm sure many of the people on this call have been part of a building program, or several. Footprint, how do we get more out of less space? Value engineering, what can we cut from our first costs? Energy, how can we cut long-term utility costs? Ask yourselves, do you ever feel like there is too much emphasis on the things that are easily to measure? Depending on your market and industry, workers account for something around 90% of the life cycle costs of a building. Unless you're entering data or manufacturing widgets, it's very hard to measure productivity, so set that aside for a second. For argument's sake, set aside new innovation and competitive reflexivity too. Can you measure the impact of improved employee wellness? That's a bit easier to measure. What we do know is that healthy employees are more engaged, have lower absenteeism, lower long-term health costs, and higher retention rates. I've heard that you can expect to spend up to 2 times an annual salary in recruiting and training highly skilled workers for replacements. The psychological impact of dull workplace environment is staggering. A lack of visual stimulation during the day can dull the senses and affect alertness. Working in a sea of cubicles with little variation in shape or color, employees are more apt to lose focus and drive, be less creative, and be less engaged with their work. Last fall, we had the opportunity to hear Dave Logan speak at the California and Nevada Credit Union Association REACH conference. Dave is a USC Business School professor and author of Tribal Leadership. He spoke about the ascendance of workplace cultures from a state of independent achievement and competition to one of mutual attainment, what he calls the we're great and everything's great stages of leadership. Why is this important? Because there are entrenched ways of working and cultural barriers to collaboration. And I'm telling you, collaboration is the number one thing our clients are asking us for. In his book, Dave describes IDEO's workplace, truly one of the most innovative and culturally adept companies in the world. Here are IDEO's rules for brainstorming. When they conceived their workplace, it had to be a physical embodiment of their cultural values. A hierarchy of office turf just didn't cut it for an organization trying to get its teams to be great together. So what does collaboration need? It needs openness and visibility so different teams can see what one another are working on. It needs private space for focused work, where individuals can complete their part of the collaborative task. It needs open and honest communication, which means easy access to team members, processes, and tools to collaborate. But most imperatively, it needs trust, because team members who trust each other are willing to communicate freely, and progress toward the right objectives accelerate. So when you see images of team members doing anything but what looks like work in an office building, this is why. It's not just a mental break from the task. It's an opportunity to break down interpersonal barriers and get to know each other on a much better level.